And now it's working. Oh my goodness. That was bonkers. It just kept doing the circle. So thank you for hanging in there, the two of you. And for those of you who will be watching this afterwards, live just didn't want to kick off. Um, so I am going to cover the topic of mediumship and how it's shown up in my life, and maybe offer some insight into what it is, at least from my perspective, and hopefully some calming uh, information. And for me, it started, I truly believe. Well, first of all, what is mediumship? Mediumship is what's considered, hello, Enrique. Thanks for hanging in there. So it's what's considered when we do communication between any of the spirit realms, you're considered a medium because you're in the middle, right? You're in the medium of communication. And what happens is when someone passes, when we all pass, we are all going to croak. Everyone gets this opportunity. There's your essence still continues, right? You still go on, you still exist. So there's the ability for all of us to communicate. First of all, everyone has the capability of doing it. I just firmly believe that some of us have an antenna that goes a little bit higher because maybe of an interest in a previous life or a development of the spiritual path, or who knows, bonks upside the head. So the ability to communicate with loved ones who have crossed, people you don't even know, happens differently for everyone. For me, I am an experiential communicator. So that means that I often feel what's going on for someone. And I tend to get the personality of the one who's crossed rather than what I consider evidentiary. So while there will be some affirmation of the personality of what they liked and often how they've crossed, and I'll go into that after, but um, I tend to be more connected to someone's essence, to their personality when they were here, to that continuation of their being, and bring through messages that way. And I truly believe that when my own mother passed when I was 29, she smacked me on the back of the head and said, "Go ahead and do that thing you do." Because in recollection, I remembered seeing spirits in our home, and and just messages flying through that I didn't know where they were coming from. I just thought it was common sense. And I believe that when she passed, and also through my own grief and wanting to understand that and wanting to believe that she was still available to me, all of this stuff started to open up again. And it still wasn't immediate. I know some people have these life changing events, and all of a sudden, it seems like all of a sudden that their senses are open, but I know it to be there were likely signs beforehand, and maybe it wasn't loud enough or profound enough to get through the noise of the day to day. So once that happened, my mom passing, and then she was the first person I truly experienced any in my lifetime passing that I had any connection to. So it was impactful. And then I had three young kids that I had to explain this to, and a husband who adored her. So there was a lot of taking care of other people. And I feel like I just postponed the grief a little bit. And then, so but I became more interested in, well, what does happen to us? Before that, I was like, listen, you croak, you're out of here, right? And my perspective changed. And then fast forward a few years, and I'm more and more interested in energy and intuition and what is it about us that makes us unique, and start to hear, as does happen in our life when you become aware of something, more and more information shows up. So have you ever purchased a vehicle and you never saw that color or that make before, and then all of a sudden they're everywhere? That's the awareness of you, picking up on what's going on in the universe. But it's also what you pay attention to, you get more of, which is why it's important for us to pay attention to our energy and what we're offering. So as I go through this and I start asking more questions, I start considering, well, maybe there is something else, because boy, I'd really like to believe that she's still there for me. My mother was pretty emotionally absent during my lifetime. She was physically present, but emotionally there in moments, spurts. So I just felt like I really needed her to still be there in some form, and that it would have been nice to get to know her as an adult. I still feel that way. So as I go through this and I start doing oracle card readings and start doing sessions for people, I'm, of course, open to more of it. As the information comes to me, I start to grow. Well, then I was working for a visiting nurse association. A lot of energy comes through there. And one of the ladies that I worked with had several types of cancer, and it had metastasized. And she was in a place where the treatments were no longer working, and she chose to stop treatment. And my husband and I were out to dinner. My late husband, more on that later, and I were out to dinner, and I looked up at him and I remember saying, "I've got to go. I've got to go to Anne's house." And well, I cared about Anne, and I was very fond of her. She had energy that just got to you 20 minutes before her physical self got to you. And just a bright, bright light. Never handed in her paperwork on time, but that's another story. And I remember saying to him, I've got to go. I've got to go to her house. And at the time, I didn't, this was before texting my friends, um, or at least before I was aware of texting. Yeah, it probably was before texting. And I wasn't aware that one of my dearest friends was at her house. They were very close. And then another friend was also there, and they were very close. So I know that their energies, these other two ladies, were pulling me towards Anne. And I really believe Anne was pulling me too. So I went, dropped the husband off at home, drove to Anne's house, and showed up uninvited, unannounced, and just sat quietly for the longest time, offering support. That is something that is greatly underappreciated. I've since learned, did not know at the time, but I've since learned, is when you can be there and be present for someone, and you can be in quiet. It's okay to not know what to say. It's very okay to not know what to say, but just be present for someone, and mostly be present for those who are there with the someone. So as we're sitting there, hours go by. I'm still not leaving. I still don't really know what I'm doing there. I honestly thought I was there to help my friends who had been more involved in her care, literally her physical care, and supporting her family. And I thought I was there to support them, kind of like a relay effect. And then my friend Mo looks at me, as only dear friends can do, and said, "You going to get going with this?" And I'm like, "I don't know what this is." And she's like, "Well, are you going to go see her? You haven't seen her yet." And I hadn't. And admittedly, I was scared. I didn't know what I was going to face when I went in there. I hadn't seen her in weeks. I didn't know why I was there, and I felt like I was intruding, but I also felt like there was nothing that was going to take my body out of this situation, unless, of course, the family said, "You gotta leave," and then I'd probably sit in the car out front. So I go down and we called her Annie Banani, and I'm rubbing her head. She's nonverbal at this point, and her son is there, and her husband has just fallen asleep. He's so exhausted, and I'm rubbing her head, and I'm like, Annie Banani, what you waiting for, honey? And I could hear her in my mind, and I'm gonna keep what that conversation was private. Even though it's been well over 10 years, I still think I need to honor her. But then I said, "Can you get going? Because it seems like you've made the choice to go. Your body is ready to go, but you're hanging on." And Anne just wanted to make sure everything was going to go well. And at this point, I really had no frame of reference. And I don't want to say I lied to the woman, but in that moment, I would have promised her anything I could feel within myself to be truth to help her release any pain or any resistance that she had. So I promised her angel wings. And I said, it's corny, it's Hallmark, it's terrible, but I did it anyway because I didn't know what to do. And I'm really good in an emergency situation, but this was way outside my league. So I said to her, she could have angel wings. Well, trust me when I say they can hear you and they can still communicate, and we will too. And she didn't want angel wings. She wanted butterfly wings. And I said, "Oh, for goodness sakes, Anne, you can have anything you want, anything you want." And I truly believed that, even though I didn't necessarily have a frame of reference. Then I pointed out that it was my belief that Jesus is present at everybody's passing. Doesn't matter what we call religion or what we call a belief system or faith. His loving energy was there, and she was devout Catholic. And I didn't say it to appease her. I truly believed that. And then she took a deep breath and she crossed. And because Anne was so funny, I have joked since, once I got over what the hell just happened. Hospice nurse was present as well. Um, I have joked that I had a witness, and to anyone I've been with who's crossed, I always have a witness. So I was so blown away by her trust in me. And maybe it was because we weren't that close. I'd like to believe she always saw me as somebody as truthful. But that opened my eyes. But what happened afterwards opened it up even more. I go back to doing readings. I think, well, her service, bunch of butterflies everywhere, just say that, to where I was like, oh my goodness. So fast forward, I go back to doing readings, working with people with their doubts, what their life is like, all that kind of stuff. And I keep seeing her out of the corner of my eye in one of my sessions. And I'm like, Anne, not now. Talking to this woman who's got to make a career choice. And finally, I said to the woman I'm working with, I said, you wouldn't happen to know Anne, I said her last name. Would you? And she starts welling up. And I'm like, okie dokie. So, one of the things you learn when you're doing readings is it's important to remain calm. And it's very important to not take on the emotions of the person. Now, I get choked up. I will shed a tear for either side. But when you're there in service, you need to be there in service and not in drama and not in theater and showmanship. If somebody's doing that, you need to question whether they are actually a professional. So after I realized she's welling up, I said, well, then I need to tell you that she's here. And Anne had these great legs. Like she had the legs. Those of us who are 5'5" and shorter have always been like, ooh, nice legs. And that's all I could see of her were her legs crossed, but I knew it was her. And I said, well, she was so grateful to know you. And I just conveyed it like I didn't know Anne because I had to create a separation. And spirit will lead you in this. If you recognize that you are a messenger. You are not any more special than anybody else. You are simply the person who's conveying the message, and you get the heck out of your own blown up ego place. This stuff will fly through. I promise you. So it turns out she was one of her nurses, but also went to nursing school with Anne. So there was a lot of history there that I just didn't know. And after that, here's another example where I feel like Anne also smacked me on the back of the head and said, "Go do that thing you do." Because she said to me that, um, "It's time, Vicky. It's time to open up this door." And I'm like, "To you, Anne, any moment, any day. Absolutely, no problem." And then I started going grocery store and I started seeing all these energies and saying, "Excuse me," to people who weren't there, physical people who weren't there. They look like people to me. So uh, then I remember going home and saying to my husband, I think something's changed. I'm not quite sure what to do with it, if I have to do anything with it, or if it's just more information for me to help people heal. And then it just progressed. I think I've always had this personality of let's just get it done, whatever it is. And my upbringing, I am grateful to my parents that there wasn't a lot of guidance because I had to figure out things a lot of the times on my own. So therefore, I had nothing to unwind. I had nobody's opinions. I didn't fear this. I just thought, well, isn't this interesting? And I'll admittedly, oh, great, another level to deal with. And then, so I actually worked as a medium, did a couple pretty good sized shows as well for probably about 12, 13 years. And I loved it. And yet there was a level of it that was becoming kind of boring to me. You know, I encourage everybody to do what they love, and to bring their unique gifts into the world. So I think it's important for me to be honest that mediumship bores me, and some of this is because I can feel those who have already crossed. I can communicate with them, and I know that they don't want us delaying our lives and giving all our energy to them not being here anymore because I call it graduating. They graduated out of their physical self into their non physical. So when I could feel that, I felt disingenuous. It was like straddling this line of, well, I can do it. Shouldn't I do it? It's healing, it's helping people, it's educating that, yeah, it's not just this one go round and then we're done. But then there was this other side of it and feeling like I don't want to be the one interrupting people on their soul's journey because when we cross, we are not complete. We are complete with this lifetime, but we are still learning. We are still helping. We're still working, although it's a work you get to do that you love to do. Nobody's made to do anything. And we're still looking forward to that next lifetime. And I thought, who am I to interrupt that? And then my husband got sick. And then my husband was non-compliant. And then he got even sicker. And then he had an event that there was no coming back from. Physically, there just was no coming back from it. And that was a very exhausting 3 years. But when it was time for him to pass, he had all this peace because he had experienced what it was like to live with me. I don't know if that brings anybody peace, but he experienced that and he had an assurance of his own that he was going to be fine. And I know was even looking forward to the next process. So when he's home, I got him home on hospice. had to fight for that, but I knew he wanted to pass at home. And when he was home, there was one of those rare moments where somebody wasn't around. And I asked him, because we talked about my career, we talked about what I did in work, and it wasn't always easy for him. But because sometimes it was a priority and he wasn't. Um, I'm okay with that. But I asked him, would it be okay if I used this event of your passing to ease myself out of mediumship? Now, I think this was a precognitive awareness for me, because after he passed, I took a month off, but then I went back to doing sessions. And at this point, I was doing more business consulting and less mediumship anyway, because as we change, the clients that we work with change. And I was excited about that. But then I had a few mediumship readings um, start to show up again, right? Once people knew I was back to work. And it was horrific, absolutely horrific, because, well, the readings were good, but I was breaking open every time I did a session, and I couldn't let my client know that. It was in a kind of a similar way. In growing up, I could never show my father that I was afraid of him, or it got worse. The physical stuff got worse. I drew on that, and I'm like, "Never let them see you sweat. You'll be okay. You can't do this. You owe it to the community." The litany of conversations going on in my head. And if you have any questions about this, for those who are watching, feel free, pop in chat. I can divert off the conversation. I just thought I would give a little bit of background here, a little bit more context of who's this chick showing up on Vicki Baird Coaching. So he said I would be a goddamn fool not to use it. And that's one of the things I love most about him, is he knew what was important to me. And in this process, he was looking out for me, because he saw the impact on me of doing communication and energy work more than I did. I would just plow through and just keep going. So after he passed, I did it for a little while, but then had to announce that I just can't. And I feel like the conversation I had with him, because I felt like I'd be using him, the conversation I had with him a couple months earlier was my intuition talking, saying, "Girlfriend, this is not something you can bluff your way through, because the sheer level of energy it took not to have an emotional breakdown after everybody left." And at that time, I was doing sessions 5 or 6 a day, and if you're not in a good space, you shouldn't be doing the work. So part of the reason that I bring this up is I closed it down. I said, "No more. I really don't want to do this. I want to honor those who have crossed. I want to heal in my own process. And then I want to do the intuitive coaching." And around the same time as my husband passed, a friend passed right before him, 3 or 4 months before him. And then another one passed 5 months after him, 6 months after him, to which I did his eulogy, which was also freaking hard. So the process of this has been pretty shut down for me. And I'm bringing it up because I have a feeling that some of this teaching is going to start showing up and maybe be woven into the soul work I do, which makes sense. Because this weekend I met a new person in my life, and she's going to represent us in a legal fashion. And her mother was right there, right there, right there. And I was like, oh boy, I will not Long Island medium someone. I will not walk up to someone and give a message. It's rude. You don't know their emotional plays. You don't know their beliefs or anything like that. But we had been talking for a few hours, and I asked her if it was okay if I said something. And, she was grateful. And when I got in the car, I'm like, are we doing this again? I do not intend to go into mediumship readings. I know that pretty solidly in my own soul. But if it helps people to understand the process with grounded information and um, how to appreciate where we are and how to expand our own consciousness while also um, creating connection with our own soul and while creating a blessing about the next phase of our lives. So uh, then go ahead and go, man. Come out of meditation and go ahead and go. Has the death of your husband changed how you deliver messages to the others who lost their significant other? I would have to say yes, because there is more of an understanding of what that process is afterwards. Um, I have this thing that I call the widow's wail, and I experienced that a couple times, and that's where you're just down on the ground and you are belly like everything hurts. Um, it helped me be more compassionate. It certainly did. It also helped me in another way. Um, it's helped me communicate to people and that it's not the end of you, right? Like it helped me, um, it's helped me understand that there comes a time where we have to move forward in and of ourselves. Like we can't keep using someone's passing as a reason to not move forward. Um, and Deborah, I'm sorry for that. I don't remember it, but um, sorry, was trying to bring it up. I don't remember it. I will say that I always have the intention of being compassionate. And sometimes um, that means being a little bit more direct than I would like to be. I will not blame this on spirit. I believe that we are the messenger and that we grow as we experience more and more things. So we don't know what we don't know. And I appreciate your communicating that. And I really appreciate you saying it was uh, less than positive experience because sometimes that helps us grow too. But I will take total responsibility. Um, uh, Perhaps you should change the name then there, Poopy Man, and have another intention towards meditation, or maybe meditate in the bathroom. You will find that I don't entertain these things. I will shoot straight back at you. So, what if you just want to check in with some loved ones? Is a way I can connect and know that it's really not my imagination? Yes. So, um, same as tapping into your intuition, right? If something just drops in, say you're going about your day and you're maybe even driving somewhere or working or um, reading or something, and someone who's passed just all of a sudden is right there, like filling your head, filling your space. Stop what you're doing, unless it's driving and you still need to pay attention. But stop what you're doing and then ask, what would you like me to know? Most of our communication comes through here, where humans try to make it through here. And that can be tricky. And then I don't know about you, but sometimes I have felt my loved ones around me, I start welling up and it gets in the way of the communication. So, it really is get calm beforehand, before you connect. I need you to ask for those, only those that are of my highest interest to communicate with me, only those that were related or loved ones in some manner. Okay. Because if not, you can get everybody that's popping around out there and it becomes a free for all. And that's hard to discern and it's hard to um, figure out who is coming through. Make sure that you're in a calm space yourself. Um, Most of the time, if you have a sense that someone is near, you're correct. You're absolutely correct. Uh, Imagination would be if you were looking, say, you were having a grief day. They happen. They absolutely happen. We have to be in them and kind of roll with them. But if you were um, telling all these stories, right, about whomever it was, and then you're like, oh, I think they're here now. I'm always going to say, believe they're there, because what harm is that going to do? But that's where you might want to say, this might be me leading this. Let me go do something. Let me step outside. Let me get a drink. Let me clear my head. Um, they will circle back if they want to communicate. Now, the other thing is if you've had a dream of them and it felt so real, like you woke up and you're like, whoa, that really felt like I was spending time with them. You did. So don't let your head do tricks with you. Now, a spirit communication is not going to come through and talk about how sad they are, how lonely they are, what they don't like, what's miserable about life. That's your subconscious being a little jerk. Most spirit communication will be without words, it'll be just like essence to essence, and a feeling of being with them. But you may as well say, this is my dad, this is my gram here, um, because it's not going to hurt. They are not with us all the time. Somebody who says your father's with you 100% of the time is trying to placate you and being, I think, disrespectful. Maybe they don't know, because it's not possible. Those who have crossed, including us, we got things to do, man. We can't just be following around those who are here in the physical. And a lot of souls who have already crossed are helping those of us in the physical, but they're working on a completely meta level. They're not showing up to see what you had for dinner. And they're not there 100% of the time, because if they were, you wouldn't be able to heal. Not necessarily. If they've crossed, are they already in another life? Not necessarily. Because there's no time on the other side. You may have heard that. Uh, the best way I've learned to translate that is, imagine 10 years of your lifetime. When we're on the other side, it's like bleep. So most of the time, and this comes from my experience of doing sessions and everything, most of the time, those who have crossed in our lifetime will still be there when we cross. Okay, so that whole greeting committee really does happen. Now it depends on who shows up, when they show up, all that. But um, they may be in another life. Here are a couple caveats. All right, there's no hard and fast to any of this, but they may be in another life if they did not fully participate in this lifetime. Say they were kind of coasting in life and didn't try to get out of their challenges or their struggles or anything like that, didn't try to learn, they may choose to come back sooner. Okay. But most of the time, there's like let's say 90-year. That was my average when I started keeping track. And when I would find a soul that was a good, talker, I would ask all these questions because can you imagine being the committee that meets me on the other side? They're going to be, because I have questions. I have as many questions as I have had direction from spirit. So the other thing is children. If when children pass, they will often come back sooner, um, because the shorter your lifetime, the greater promotion, right? You get credit for that great big lifelong lifetime of live. They just didn't need to be here that long. And I'm not minimizing anybody's pain, but this is what I know. So oftentimes children will come back through quicker. Um, and animals too, because they get the whole crossing process. To them, it's kind of no big deal. Animals actually call it being released when we have to make that decision. They may be in another lifetime. There's no way to guarantee that that soul will be there um, when you cross. But that's part of being in soul groups, and that's part of our transition process. No one crosses alone. No one. Everybody's got a committee. Even if they felt isolated or alone in this lifetime, it's pretty crowded. It's as crowded when someone's passing as it is when someone's being born. Not a lot of room in those rooms energetic. I've actually been at the bedside of someone passing and be sitting like this. And I had a friend ask me, "Are you okay? Are you nervous? What's going on?" I'm like, "Oh, for goodness sakes. I'm trying to make space for everybody around me when they don't need me to make space." So, this process of, many lifetimes, we are here to embrace it. We are here, I think, to learn how to appreciate each moment that we have, whether it's in physical or it's in non physical. And there are going to be crappy moments and there are going to be crappy days, sometimes even weeks. And I feel like some of this is coming up for me again because my message of someone passing is to celebrate. I would actually say to my husband quite often, high five me, high five me. You're completing your contract. You are completing. I don't like it. I have some opinions, but I will support you in that in every way that I possibly can, because to pass peacefully is a gift that we all have the capability of having, but sometimes our messaging can get in the way. So, thank you for showing up. Thank you for the subscribers, for hitting that bell, following along, and for your questions. I so appreciate you showing up and, hey, pooping in. Good luck to you, man. Good job moving energy, I guess. So take care. Thank you very much. Vicki Baird Coaching on all the platforms and the podcast Intuition, Your Success Compass. And I'll see you next Wednesday. You're welcome, honey.